every single person in the company is responsible for culture. Everybody has to take some ownership to foster and evolve culture around them. The culture is built through action. So it's really by virtue of acting in accordance with cultural values, like you naturally create that culture around you. So it's definitely something that we demand from our leadership team through a set of leadership principles. We hold ourselves very strictly accountable to how we operate and set the example for the company that we want everybody else to mimic.
Welcome to the Startup CEO Show. I'm your host, Mark Macleod. In this episode, I sit down with Vitaly Pechersky, co-founder and CEO of StackAdapt. Vitaly and his team have built their company over the last 11 years to have over 500 million in revenue, and they 10x their headcount in the last 5 years. On this episode, he walks us through that journey, their decision that was kind of forced on them to not raise venture early and how that benefited them, how they went through that hyper growth, how he transitioned from COO to CEO, the importance of core values and culture and how to live them inside your company. And then we ended with his thoughts on advice for marketers, which was counterintuitive but so powerful. I want to leave that insight for you. It's at the end. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Vitaly, welcome to the Startup CEO Show. It's a true pleasure to have you here. How are you doing today?
Another day in paradise. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Canada in the winter. I don't know if we refer to that as paradise or not, but I love the outlook.
I love the cold, so it's okay.
Yeah. I was trying to think of the last time I spoke with you, and I honestly feel like it was 2013 or 14. It was like very shortly after I started SurePath Capital. So it's been amazing to see your progress, and I'm hoping we can dig into that today. Maybe for folks who don't know, just tell us what StackAdapt does.
So what we do now is, interestingly, what we do now, I think in so many ways, is exactly what we set out to do 11 years ago, except it's just gotten way more complex than I ever imagined it would be. But at our core, we build an enterprise software platform that used by marketing teams within agencies or brands to run advertising and increasingly more like larger marketing orchestration campaigns across the internet to drive, retain, expand customers.
I love it. And so do you make a distinction between marketing and advertising? Are those kind of separate functions to you? And are there specific verticals? Like I'm guessing like e-commerce merchants, but are there other kind of, sweet spots for you?
Yeah. So when it comes to verticals, I think, pretty much every vertical imaginable from financial services to e-commerce, automotive, education, travel, you name it. When it comes to distinction between marketing and advertising, I think it's some of these lines are not perfect. I mean, advertising, as I see it, is just a subset of marketing. Mm-hmm. And we, as a platform, want to increasingly become a larger marketing platform. So that means expanding beyond advertising, even though advertising is still our core business and the largest segment of our business. But we just see that like growing businesses is so hard, and we know that advertising is not the only thing you need to do to be successful. So what are all the things that a business needs to do to be successful? And we're trying to increasingly increase the footprint of our platform so we can connect it all in an intelligent way to drive business growth for customers.
That makes sense. And maybe last question, and then let's dig into the journey. But are you running media spend through your platform as well, or it's strictly a software layer that then plugs into how your marketers place and run their advertising?
It's a software platform. You can buy advertising through it. You can you can connect it to your Shopify or HubSpot. You can push the data into StackAdapt. Off of this data, you can segment it. You can orchestrate. So a sequence of campaigns. You can deliver an email. They didn't open an email. You can deliver them a connected TV ad. So you can build orchestration, connecting the fragmented ecosystems between customer engagement and programmatic. So parts of the platform are definitely transaction around buying advertising, and parts of it are more like a classic SaaS product.
Cool. That's great. So my understanding, you talked about, hey, we're over 11 years in. My understanding is you've crossed 500 million in revenue, which is amazing. I'm wondering if you could just talk about the big milestones or inflection points along the way? Just walk us through that journey, because most folks never get anywhere close to that scale.
There's a bunch of milestones that we've crossed throughout the years. I think in the moment when you cross them, they always seem maybe more significant than when you look back at them. And I think actually, in retrospect, the most significant milestones were the ones that only looking back, I could recognize that those were the most significant milestones, not necessarily in the moment, because they're not necessarily tied to maybe specific like dollar amounts or specific product releases. A lot of it almost comes back to some kind of philosophical breakthrough or a new insight of how we think about the business. And those usually then translate into more tactical decisions around product or business strategy. If I can point probably to a couple decisions. So pretty early on, I think it will tie into a question of like us raising not that much primary capital in earlier days. It's, when myself and my two other co-founders, we started building, I've known one of them for 5 months, the other one matters of, weeks. So we've had no history together. We were taking a giant leap of faith, essentially dividing the company 3 ways and just going at it, even though we've barely known each other. Going to the market and trying to raise money to fund product development and accelerate the build of the platform. Naturally, the first questions were like, well, why you guys? Like, you're in your mid-20s. You barely know each other. You have no history of working together. It doesn't look great when you try to present yourself that way. So at some point, we almost realized, like, expecting that somehow we'll break through the noise, and like we see that a lot of odds are stacked against us because, like, on the surface, it doesn't, like, that story is not strong. So we said, you know what, like, let's own our own destiny. Let's try to build a product, get in the hands of customers as soon as possible. And this kind of own your own destiny has became in many ways like a core value of how we operate as a company, of just owning your own destiny. Rely as much as possible on our inherent capabilities, our strength to control the future, versus hoping that somebody comes in and rescues us. So it gives us something that will unlock the next stage of growth, and really try to hone in on what is that we can do as a company that can propel us to the next phase of growth. So that's early milestone, but like very foundational, like to the next decade of building. I can call out a couple more if there's interest.
Yeah, I'd love to maybe just double click on that first, and then let's see, because that's describing the origin.
Yeah, we can chronologically go through it.
I'm sure some other things have happened since, but like, first of all, on like coming together with ththese relative strangers, Y Combinator ran a study where they looked back at kind of their portfolio, which is of course vast, and tried to figure out what are the predictors of success. And the number one predictor of success was how long the founders knew each other. So your data point is not correlated with that. So I'm just curious, like, how have you made this collaboration work?
So I did not see that study, but it's interesting, and I can imagine that probably we're more on the exception side than the rule. Counter to this point is that I've tried starting businesses before with people that I've known for many years, and actually that didn't work, because then where you find yourself is crossing this line. Well, we were always friends. Now we're trying to cross a line into being business partners, and that can be painful. And for many people, that ends in fractured friendships. And I think I think it's logical that you go in business with somebody that you know, because you have a sense that, well, you can trust them. But you might be, in my view, overlooking some pretty important compatibility topics when it comes to actually running the business together. So even though when Ildar, myself, and Yang was started, we didn't know each other for very long, but there were some values that I could very quickly see in them that I was like, these are, even though we don't know each other, I could see their value system, their work ethic, a lot. The skill compatibility aligns very well to what I think would make us successful long term. Definitely, there's still a bet. Like, you still have to roll the dice, and that's an element of luck, absolutely. But I think early on, there was a sense of like very quick. We quickly built trust. And what happened next is like it's a bit of sequence of luck. And I think, where the luck really comes in is the fact that we were able to stick it out together for so many years. Nobody early on, a year into the business, had some unexpected life-changing event that forced them to step down, for example. That happens for so many businesses, and you cannot control this. Even if you have perfect compatibility, you're the best co-founders, for example, but for somebody, some accident in the family or some event changes their ability to stay with the business, and that creates a huge pressure on the business. But for us, even though we didn't know each other, we had this early compatibility that we knew. The fact that we're able to stick it out together and have gone through a decade plus with no drama, no conflicts, like that's rare, and that's a bit of luck.
It sure is. It truly is rare. I often joke that, co-founders, it's like you're married, but you don't get to have sex. So and sex keeps several couples together, but you don't have that remedy. So you have other ways to make it work. This episode is brought to you by Limitless. Limitless is an exclusive community of VC-backed CEOs who want to scale themselves and their companies without limits. The biggest outcomes in the startup world are founder-led. Meta, Amazon, Shopify, Airbnb, Canva, NVIDIA. Behind every one of these companies is a founding CEO who didn't just scale their business, they scaled themselves. They added 1 zero at a time and today run companies with billions of dollars in revenue each. That's the goal of Limitless, to give you the tools, strategies, mindset, and community to lead at the highest level without sacrificing your health, relationships, or purpose. Through group calls, an elite peer network, a proprietary AI coaching bot, members-only library, and in-person experiences, Limitless gives its members everything they need to keep scaling themselves and their companies for as long as they want. Go to limitless.ceo to learn more. I deeply believe that everything in life happens for you, not to you, even though it doesn't always feel that way in the moment. And it seems pretty clear that your inability to raise capital early on ended up being a gift for you. A, in terms of ownership, but B, this whole ethos that came out of, hey, we're just going to control our own destiny. Now, I'm guessing once you had some success, that question mark around, well, hey, they don't know each other, like that risk went away. Have you been tempted to raise money along the way? And, how have you thought about, whether we get on the venture train or not?
Yeah, since then we've brought a number of investors. So that sort of, in many ways, our path became more average as time went on, because like we've been able to bring some, tier one investors on a cap table. But
and was that, I should know this, but was that like a typical Series A, or did you kind of skip that stage and go more to growth stage investors?
Yeah, we skipped the series, very early stage financing, and then we jumped into growth stage 2022, so many years after their early stage rounds. But at that point, it was more about the rationale for it was quite different than early days. Early days, it was all about how do we afford, bring the next team member. Now it's more about how do we position ourselves towards become a category leader? How do we surround ourselves with a deep network of experts and people who can help us at the next stage of growth, add credibility to the business, can support us through many years of as a private company, or one day if we're ever to be public. So really strategically building towards much bigger outcomes in the long run. So much sense. Less about short term.
A full half of my clients when I was running SurePath Capital were bootstrapped or had maybe raised some small amount of money at the beginning and then got profitable. And they would often skip venture and go right to either growth equity or private equity. And one of their main motivations actually was to get some feedback and accountability. It's like they didn't have a real board of directors. We're just doing stuff. We don't know. Nobody's pushing me. I can do whatever I want. I can go golf all day. I need some accountability. Was that a thing for you?
I think we had always a pretty good sense of accountability. I think we always worked our butts off. But I think bringing on like really like institutional investors who've seen companies at real scale, building out a board to a much more mature board, having that level of accountability from like external communication, not just on execution on the business side, but also how do we communicate our plans with the board? How do we communicate with investors? All of that had to be matured because, admittedly, this is our first time doing it. So it's very hard to know what good looks like. And as we start surrounding ourselves with experts, you naturally are exposed to, what do the best companies do? How can we leverage that? And I think in the last 3 years, we have transformed into a much more mature organization from the way we plan our business, the way we understand our business, and it has translated into execution as well. That's probably the challenging part, is that not often this type of effort translate into actually successful execution on the business side. But I think with us, it's we've seen that it helped us execute much better.
I love it. Bringing on those investors, how has that changed the company for you?
Well, I think it's naturally when it's just a few founders or a couple or founders, you essentially do whatever you want. To your point is, nothing prevents from some companies for their leadership team to be like, oh, you know what? It's we're gonna just go golfing every Thursday afternoon from now onwards. The business is doing well. Like, we can afford taking a foot off the gas in some ways. Like, we've never thought like that. We always wanted to build something really big, and you understand that, like, to do that, you have to give up some degree of control, because if we draw a line from founder-led, small business where they decide exactly everything that's happening, to a large cap public company where the board as shareholders play a large role in the direction of the company and election of the CEO, and it becomes much more accountable. So I think the big transition really happens around just giving up some degree of control, but understanding the way I think about it is that, like, this is just a normal course of action, but it's very hard to do it any other way, like, that should force us to build a business that could, in theory, function independently from us, even. So that, like, how do we build a business that's the most durable? And we know that the only way to do this is, like, if the whole business is not riding on decision on, like, one or several people, right? You want to build systems that are durable, that where you have many contingencies, and the price for that is some of that control that I think some founders at small scale are not willing to give up. But I think I've fully embraced that, to scale into something really big, there are parts of that control that you have to surrender. And I think it's for the greater good of the company.
That totally makes sense. Last question I have around the origin, because of course I think being at scale is far more interesting to folks. But I believe, like, most startups raise capital too early, and when they do that, unless they had they have a prior track record, or they come from some big company that had great success, they're going to struggle, and so not necessarily get the best investors. And of course, it's a one-way decision. There's nothing you can do about it. So in practical terms, how did you guys bootstrap? Like, was there a services component out of the gate? Was it an agency that became a software company? How did that work?
We did some services in the very beginning, where we essentially use third-party technology to just deliver services. And in parallel, we started building our own product. And then as soon as we got meaningful traction, which happened about 9 months into the company, we just said, we were building towards being a product company. Like, that first 9 months or so, that was really for us to validate some ideas using third-party technology, and then very quickly pivot towards just doing it with our own product. You were talking about founders raising money too early.
Yeah.
And so I think what I was going to comment on that is that I think quite a few founders, I see quite a few businesses maybe overestimate the opportunity and the total addressable market, or they look at some total addressable market and they think it has no ceiling, when in reality, the math of how that total addressable market compresses down to something that they can realistically obtain. That math, I think a lot of them, in some ways, they overestimate the size of their market. They raise money too early, and then they hit the ceiling on growth, and they're stuck in this no man's land where they raised a lot of money, which the only way to return that capital is to continue growing. Growth is really hard to come by because the market is actually not as big as they thought it is. And it's really, really hard to get out of without some major pivots or a lot of luck. So I think delaying raising money, to me, is just an opportunity to validate, like, is there a real total addressable market? Is it so large and like you can capture meaningful enough share realistically? And I'll raise money when you see like a true, real continuous exponential growth that if additional capital can really continue driving it versus, hoping that additional capital will accelerate the growth that maybe it doesn't exist.
I agree with that. That's definitely a thing. I also think that separate from size of the addressable market, many startups just raise too much capital relative to the revenue that they achieve for it. And so I've sold lots of companies where we got a great multiple of revenue, but the founder's shares were worthless and they just got a carve out. And the reason was what I just said. Like, they raised too much capital, the pref stack was too high. Strategic buyers don't like making VCs rich. They do it for the exceptional, kind of truly shiny companies. But most exits are meat and potato, too small for buyers to even bother disclosing the purchase price. And on those ones, like, there needs to be a very tight correlation between the amount of capital you raise and the amount of revenue you generate. And I think that's where a lot of companies shit the bed, frankly.
I think that math is not very well understood, because I think optically you say, oh, we raised at a huge valuation, big round, and we have been able to maintain big share. But then the question is like, well, what's going to happen next? How are you going to grow into that that valuation?
That's
and
right.
we know that multiples tend to compress as you scale up. So then you realize, like, your business needs to grow so significantly, and it's so difficult. Then they find themselves in this situation. They just tap out, and then people walk away with very little to show for.
That's right. I mean, by definition, VCs have to overpay early on. Otherwise, it would be like Shark Tank or Dragon's Den. Like, I'm going to take a third of your company for like some tiny amount of money, because you have nothing right in those early stages, right? And so, to your point, you have to grow into this totally lofty, unrealistic valuation. And then, of course, the more you raise, the more you have to grow. So it's tough.
Yeah. For us, when we raised our first round, it was the value. Everything was so conservative. I mean, granted, this was very different. This was 10 years ago. This was a different world, but we never had that problem because we were so humble about what we're trying to do, that we're just happy to have any additional boost. But we're lucky that we're lucky in some ways that we're not in a category where our egos were inflated, maybe, and our expectations were so inflated that we actually always took a fair valuation. But in the long run, actually, it played out very well, because I think it gave us a lot of room for growth, because we never had to live up to something really unrealistic.
Yep, I love it. So going back to your journey, I often tell my CEOs, like, the single biggest thing you can do to grow yourself as CEO is unlock revenue growth and then hang on for dear life. And, it sounds like your revenue traction happened early. You've got like a meaningful amount of revenue now. So you've been on this virtuous cycle of, like, the bigger the company gets, the better you get, the bigger the company gets. Like, it's genuinely a virtuous cycle. But I'm curious, what else have you done? First of all, do you agree with that theory or not? Feel free to throw up on it. But also, what else have you done to make sure that you are always the CEO that StackAdapt needs?
I mean, to address your first question, every year feels in some ways we're a bit of a different company
Mm-hmm.
with different set of requirements. And even though it feels like we've been around for 10 years and it, for all intents and purposes, it was a fairly long time. We were a team of 170 people when COVID happened, and now we're a team of 1,600 people. So
Oh
we
my God.
almost 10x'd our team in the last 5 years. So it's like every year is so different. So it naturally leads to a lot of need for evolution for the leadership team, myself included. And I think, we had to do, I feel personally, I had to do a lot of growth this year to set myself up for 2026. How do I know? So to your question earlier, so my co-founder Ildar was the CEO of the company for the first 9 years, and I've been in the CEO seat for the last 2 years. So I only have 2 years in the CEO seat. And some months anticipating the transition. So that was a bit of a scramble that I had to do a little bit of a catch up. So to your question is like, how do I know that I'm the right CEO? How did you frame this question? Just
What do
answer that
you
exact question.
do?
Mm-hmm.
Like you just said, you've gone through almost 10x growth in 5 years, which means if you were leading it this whole 5 years, you would need to 10x. But the point is like whatever your growth rate is this year, like you need to grow by that amount or you start to fall behind and you become the weak link. So like, how do you personally grow faster than this business?
There's probably many things I can think of. Maybe one way in which I've grown this year is I've been just trying to proportionally drive the focus of our business around key things that I really believe will be the driving force for our growth. So maybe my growth this year was by virtue of just forcing the company to regain a lot of focus around key, very few but very important aspects of our product or our execution. And probably, there's an element of continuous growth around like the way I'm thinking about this year and next year. There's literally 5 things that I wrote on our company's priorities and said like we just have to nail these things. And I myself trying to develop as much expertise and as much understanding about what's happening in the business, how it all comes together from a very minute pieces with an execution, or form a very strong opinion about what that should look like 12 months from now, really work closely with the team to execute on those items. So maybe I look at my personal growth from a perspective of increased focus and increased understanding about just a few key areas within our business that I believe will be the main drivers for us in the next 3 to 5 years. And I think in the past, counter to that, I think some of my attention was maybe spread a little bit too thin, thinking that, we need to almost always expand into new areas to drive growth. This year thematically was more around regaining focus and much more defining much tightly, like what is our philosophy around expansion to new areas? How do we think about them in relation to our core business? And how do we put this all together into some universal framework that we can live and breathe by, that we think that it's what's going to take us through the next 10x growth.
Right. Many CDOs I speak with, they have like a coach, they're part of a peer group, maybe they have some mentors or advisors. Do you do any of those things?
I have a bit of that. To be honest, I never had a specific point in time that I was like, I have to join a specific group, or I have to, like a lot of these things happen very organically. And there was just a point in time where maybe I was introduced to somebody that I just felt really good chemistry with, and suddenly I found myself either being part of the group or working with somebody. So I have a CEO coach. I'm part of one group of entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are just not structured. I just have made friends along the years that, they're doing their own thing. I'm doing my own thing. We talk about business. And I have, a few acquaintances that sometimes pick their brain on some, topics that are, that bigger companies, dealing with, just to anticipate, what kind of set of problems we should expect. How do we build towards that next bigger stage of our business? But yeah, I would say that support system is super important. And I think one of the challenging parts for me in earlier days of the business was that, I was in my mid-20s. I had almost no connections to anybody who's built a successful business that I could like realistically sit down and pick their brain. So I think we probably wasted a bunch of time figuring a lot of things out from scratch, when in reality, like, we could have probably saved years of our lives if we had the right mentors and the right advice. It's always a bit tricky. Like, it always has to be taken with a bit of grain of salt, because a lot of things that we've done, a lot of people are telling us like our approaches were wrong, and we went and did them despite those counter to those that conventional advice. And I think that's what allowed us to do something that's somewhat unconventional, and we broke out from challenging industry, against a lot of odds. So some of that advice has to be taken with a grain of salt, but at the same time, I think we could have saved some years if we had somebody really experienced, really strong, that was able to lay out like exactly how we should be, at least thinking about the business and like form our decisions. Like, there are some playbooks for sure.
Right. That totally makes sense. So you talked about you've been CEO for 2 years. You were COO before. I'm curious, two things. How did you prepare yourself for CEO, and did it actually work, or did you just have to be CEO and figure it out?
I think you probably just have to be and figure it out. I think so, because I was a co-founder alongside Ildar, who was the CEO for the first 9 years. I think and our relationship was always very unique, because we shared responsibilities probably unlike any other CEO or CEO. Like, our working relationship was very flexible around who took care of what. And so he took care of some maybe COO like work. I took care of some CEO work. So it was not a total switch from something. Parts of the job were net new. So, for example, managing the board or fundraising was net new. But a lot of work that I was doing previously, I was already doing it, so I just kept on doing it. So there was not much of a change. Well, I'll say generally, I think I called him about 6 months ago, and I said, I just, now that I've been in the seat for like about 18 months, I've got to tell you that I have a different appreciation for what you've been doing for the first 9 years. Like,
that's awesome.
Like, I thank you for doing it for so long, because like, this is way harder than what I expected.
It truly is. Honestly, when I was operating, I was offered the CEO gig twice, and I turned it down flat both times. I was very happy being a number 2 or number 3 exec in an org, and the CEO, the bigger you get, just like everybody wants a piece of you. Like, it's just a super demanding role, rewarding, and I only coach CEOs now, but I do that because it's the toughest role. And then with founding CEOs specifically, like, all the biggest outcomes are founder-led, right? So how do we enable those founders to keep growing faster than their companies year after year after year, right? Just totally obsessed with that question. But yeah, to your point, really demanding role.
Yeah, but I'm also having just the most fun. It's just hard to imagine doing anything else now that, having done this job for 2 years, like, I can't imagine doing anything else.
I love it. 10xing growth, 10xing headcount in 5 years. Like, first of all, sounds like a nightmare, but also a nightmare that everyone listening or watching would love to have. Like, that would be a champagne problem. Looking back, how did you make that happen without it being total chaos? Or was it just total chaos?
I was gonna say it was total chaos.
Okay.
But it was because, so what happened is COVID hit and we all went virtual, and that was basically when we're building out of Canada. Everybody's in Toronto. A lot of our business is increasingly global. Why would we be being just in Toronto? Let's unlock all these networks of people and talent globally. So we started hiring in the US, UK. And so because of that, a lot of this growth happened virtually. You never were, actually facing this size of the organization until we had our company-wide event for the first time since COVID last January, and we walk in the room with like 1,000 people. You're like,
Amazing.
oh my gosh, this is what it looks like. You never see this many people in Slack, so it kind of doesn't even connect that it's so big. So I think that virtual component was huge for us because being able to just ship laptops, add a user on within all software, and we had like one thing we did well, I think, is we always had pretty robust onboarding programs. So when COVID hit, we already had sort of a very solid framework for how do we onboard people and how do we make them successful. So I think that's why we were able to rapidly start adding a lot of people to the organization, and it didn't break. I think there, some things could have worked better, but in retrospect, I think if they worked smoother, we probably didn't hire fast enough. So, I would say by 2022, yeah, ballpark, when we were about 900 people, I think that's, a lot of this fears of recession start hitting. That's when we're like, okay, we added so many people. Let's pump the brakes a little bit and like really tighten up our internal operations, make sure that all the systems mature, catch up with our headcount. And so for the past like 3 years, we've now at 1,600 people. So we've kept on growing, especially over the last 12 to 18 months. But now that all the systems, all the processes have kind of entered this new chapter of maturity, like right now, next year, we're probably planning to add another 500 people. And, it feels like it's going to be more or less like business as usual, which is good. Like it's going to put some strain on the organization, but I don't really think that there's something that should break, because I think a lot of what we have now is like should scale, by 30%.
Yep.
Like we're not 10xing it anymore. At this scale, it's like a question, well, can we add 30-40% a year? And the answer is yes.
So implied in what you said there, like obviously in COVID, many companies were forced to go to remote, but then more and more, a lot of CEOs have been demanding people come back into office. You made a decision. You are now just remote. Is that correct, or are you hybrid?
We call it virtual first. We have two hubs which we call are in Toronto and London. So people can come in, but it's entirely voluntary, and we're calling ourselves virtual first.
What, if anything, did you do to make sure that culture and values remained strong as you made that transition?
A lot of repetition. I think we've always taken great care of our culture because we just wanted to have an environment where people feel like they can belong, they can actually form friendships, have a place where they can be productive and successful. And culture was always top of mind for us. I think two critical key areas that we've been focusing on, especially, is just reinforcing the fact that every single person in the company is responsible for culture. It's not something that can be only pushed down by the CEO and everybody else just expects it magically to happen across the organization. Everybody has to take some ownership to foster and evolve culture around them. And the second point is that like it all is the culture is built through action. So it's really by virtue of acting in accordance with cultural values, like you naturally create that culture around you. So it's definitely something that we demand from our leadership team through a set of leadership principles. We hold ourselves very strictly accountable to how we operate and set the example for the company that we want everybody else to mimic. So it definitely starts from the top, and I really hope I live our culture through action. Like that's where I think it's the most important for me, is that am I acting in accordance with our values? I hope I do.
Culture flows down from the top. That's for sure.
Yeah. For accountability, number one is me. Accountability number two, leadership team. And then hopefully the rest of the organization will follow.
Yeah.
So yeah, those two principles of like how the company culture is built, and that's why we're prescriptive about some areas of like how we want people to operate, but a lot of the times I think we're more focused on this idea of like just understanding of how company culture forms, and subconsciously, I think everybody can very easily distinguish what is a good company culture, what is a bad company culture. So I don't have to go and tell everybody, line by line, it's like what is good and what is bad. Everybody already knows it. Everybody can sense it on almost subconscious level. So how do we bring it top of mind for everybody that you already know what it is? You are empowered to shape that company culture around you, and you do it through action. So if you act in accordance with that good company culture, you should see it shaped like that around you. Obviously, it doesn't happen all the time, but being virtual first at 1,600 people across 20 different countries, I think like there's something to it that seems to work, and I'm not looking to change it going into New Year.
Yep. No, it's clearly working. That's for sure. So, some very famous CEOs write an annual letter. Warren Buffett's done one forever. Jeff Bezos did, like a bunch of people do. My understanding is you do as well. And if so, could you just tell us about that?
No, I don't, unfortunately.
You don't?
Wait.
Okay. Well, it showed up in my research, but I can get rid of that.
So I do a bunch of, these, annually on my birthday, I write a letter, but it's like in a personal capacity.
Oh, okay.
Every week I write a letter, like an email to our team, which I call Memento Weekly. And I talk about all things top of mind for me. So every single week on Monday at 4 a.m. Eastern time, it lands in everybody's inbox. And so far, since I started, I haven't skipped a week.
That's great.
And then at the end of the year, I've been doing a mix of, in early days, it was like I call it top 40, which is just summary of all the things we accomplished this year. The last like three or 4 years, it was more like the videos where I recorded specific key messages. But I don't have a letter that I write as like a shareholder letter that some of the famous CEOs write.
I wasn't thinking of it as a shareholder letter per se, but more like an annual thing. I'm curious if you're willing to share that letter you write to yourself on a personal front every year. I guess, what are you trying to achieve with that? Is it a retrospective? Is it look into next year? Like, what's that all about? Because, the number one thing for CEOs is self-awareness, and that kind of letter feels like it would promote self-awareness. So I'm very curious.
So I actually publish them publicly on my blog.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
So I've been writing it for 9 years now. And it's taken so many shapes and sizes, and it's not been consistent around the theme of it. It's just been, this is my birthday, and I want to write about things that are top of mind for me. And they covered all kinds of random things. Some of it introspective, some of it lesson learned. But it's because I'm writing for myself mainly to look back on and like force myself to reflect on the years past. I don't hold myself to, like, I don't feel pressure that it has to resemble something. It's just, that's why I think it just comes out however it comes out.
Love it. It's a great practice.
But it started with something more structured. Like I think I started my blog. This was like 9 years ago when I tried to, I think I wanted to write more and share some early lessons of building the company with early stage entrepreneurs. And I kind of over the years kind of mainly transitioned to write whenever I feel like. It's just something that I have, but I don't commit to any timeline. Sometimes I write every quarter, sometimes every 6 months. But I do like writing, and hopefully in the future I'll write more.
I love it. I think writing's so powerful. It's certainly for me, it clarifies my thinking, right? I learn when I write. So it's super, super useful. Maybe as we start to wrap up here, when I talk to many of my companies about marketing at large, and advertising is a subset of that, they feel like there's just lots of moving pieces, algorithms changing, iPhone platform causing changes to advertising now, people searching for products or merchants inside ChatGPT, etc. So I'm curious, like, what's the state of the union? What's working, what's not, and what's the future of advertising in your mind?
Maybe I'll take a slightly different approach, and maybe because I just talk so much about this topic that I'm a little fatigued by it. But I think
Okay.
I will what I'll talk about today, like what I think maybe the way I'll answer your question is that I think in the subject of marketing, what is not talked enough is the subject of product, and I think it's way easier to make good marketing when you have a good product. And I understand, marketing teams sometimes are stuck promoting what they have.
Yes.
But I would say if I was a marketing leader, I would insert myself much closer to the product and find ways to influence that in some ways. I know this is easier said than done, but I would say making the product continuously better. You get to a stage where product is just so good that marketing is easy because people come back. They talk about it. And I think, this is a subject that's, maybe is not talked enough in the marketing world because it all starts with a great product. And I think, of course, good marketing can make any like a same product with better marketing will perform better. But a good product with great marketing will work even better. So I'd say maybe my sort of 2 cents is that marketing teams should sit much closer to product and potentially even influence the direction the product should go, because great product should make marketing much easier.
I really, really love that answer. I'm glad you didn't give me the usual whatever state of advertising. But it's such a good insight. You're absolutely right. And I think, a lot of CEOs will turn to, it's funny, like when a product is not great, it impacts many areas. So some will turn to customer support as a Band-Aid, or more operations, right? We'll do more duct tape and apply more Band-Aids to get the result. Or in the extreme, we'll add a managed service around the product. All of this masks that the product isn't best in class, where if it was, to your point, truly disruptive, it's not that it would sell itself, but then marketing's got, a really powerful asset to work with. So I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time. I'm curious, are we going to see you with a suit ringing the bell someday? Is an IPO something that you're thinking about?
Maybe one day.
Yeah.
I haven't wore a suit since my wedding day, so I'll have to bring it to the dry cleaners.
So good. Well, congrats on all your success. Like I said at the beginning, honestly, it's rare. We seem sometimes, you read TechCrunch all the time and you think that these billion-dollar outcomes and billion-dollar valuations are common, but they're not. They're like statistically very improbable. So even though you're still going, you're mid-flight, like you're already in very rare air. And so, it's great to see it. I really appreciate you making time to come on the show.
Yeah, thanks. Huge kudos to our team, and thanks a lot for having me. Hopefully, next update, I'll give it in a suit.
I love it.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Startup CEO Show. If you'd like to connect with me, be sure to visit my website at markmacleod.me or follow me on LinkedIn at @themarkmacleod or Twitter at @markmacleod_. And if you want to tune in again next week, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.